The beginning portion of this session has been re-recorded, as the live portion was not recorded properly. The live recording begins at approximately 47 minutes. Welcome, welcome. This afternoon's session is one in a series of learning sessions developed and designed by Ingenuity's Learning and Development Program residents. The program is called Constellation because the residents have come together over the last several months to ideate, knowledge share, and workshop their respective learning sessions so that they can elevate key areas of their expertise, research, and experience as arts partners and arts educators, and share it back with you all, in essence, creating a partner-to-partner learning network. So thank you to all of the residents for this incredible collaboration and thoughtful work. Today's session, developed by Tyra Bullock, will address challenges that Black arts ed leaders face and some of the ideas for improving our experiences working in this field. We'd like to acknowledge that this convening is taking place on the stolen and unceded land of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa nations. Because of the Great Lakes, the land naturally became a site of travel, healing, trade, and gathering for more than a dozen other native tribes, and is still home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois that practice their traditions and care for the land. As we begin this program, we invite you to consider how to incorporate the study of Native peoples' arts and culture into your practice, in solidarity and alignment with Illinois House Bill 1633, a new law that goes into effect in the 24-25 school year, mandating Native histories be taught in K-12 schools in Illinois. You can find out more by scanning the QR code on the screen or by going to chicagoaicc.com. Hello, I'm Ariel Frost, Manager of Partnerships and Learning at Ingenuity, and I'm very happy to introduce Tyra Bullock, our Constellation resident and Associate Director of Education at Goodman Theater. Take it away, Tyra.
Thank you, Ariel. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Tyra Bullock. I use she, her pronouns. I am an artist, an arts administrator, arts educator, and as Ariel mentioned, I am also the Associate Director of Education for the Goodman Theater, which is the largest and oldest theater company in Chicago. Previously, I've also been a teaching artist for multiple organizations, such as the ones that are listed here. Steppenwolf Theater, Goodman Theater, Lifeline Theater, Victory Gardens, Northlight, Oklahoma Children's Theater, etc. We could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So our goals for today's workshop, first to understand some of the common challenges experienced by Black arts ed professionals. Um, Also, just to say that there will be an opportunity later in today's workshop to actually hear from some of those voices in the space. Second, to investigate the effectiveness of workplace initiatives that strive to create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment. I do want to preface by saying that when we use the term diversity, that definitely applies to a wide range of demographics and is not limited to just people of color. However, in the context of today's workshop, I will be highlighting the voices of how these policies have historically impacted Black employees. And then finally, discussing best practices for supporting and retaining Black arts ed professionals at all degrees of leadership. So our workshop at a glance. Um, so first, obviously, our introductions, but I also just wanted to create an opportunity for us to go over some basic guidelines, just to make sure that everyone feels good being in the space today through our community agreement. Some of you I asked to go ahead and just plug in some things that you felt like you needed today to set yourself up for success. Some of those were included in the chat. But I also just wanted to offer some of those, which we'll talk through in just a bit. Third, we're going to be doing a little bit of context. So just kind of hearing like where some of these ideas came from for today's workshop. And then we're going to actually take a look at Goodman Theater's Idea Action Plan, my organization, and just to see how some of the work that's being done over there is applicable to some of the topics that we'll be diving into today. And then our Empowering Perspective series, which I'm really excited to introduce to you all. It's a compilation of different interviews that I conducted with several of our Black arts ed professionals that are here in the city of Chicago. And then we will have an opportunity to brainstorm and share out some of the findings from today's workshop and see how we can apply that at our own institutions. And then we will close out and hopefully be able to connect after today's workshop and exchange some of the ideas that came from our time together. So with our community agreement, although I am the facilitator of today's workshop, I just want to say that I'm not an expert in this subject matter. I know that I am a Black arts ed professional, but that does not mean that I speak for that entire group of peoples. So some of the questions that may arise today, I may not have the answers to, but that is okay. And so I'm holding myself accountable and approaching this content from a place of curiosity, open-mindedness, and a willingness to learn. There's going to be moments in today's workshop that may lead to a bit of discomfort and maybe even moments of a lack of understanding, and that is also okay. So these guidelines are simply a tool for establishing an effective and respectful learning space for everyone who is on this call. And to make the most of our time together, there will also be moments where I may ask the participants to engage in a large or small group discussion, which may also prompt folks to unmute themselves if you are in the Zoom call, and turn on their cameras and respond in the chat. But please also be encouraged to take a break, use the restroom, stretch, whatever it is that you need to do. This time is for you, so please make sure that you are prioritizing that. And that goes for the people that aren't in the Zoom space, as well as the people who may be watching this after the fact. So in the image being shown, there is an array of terms that you are probably familiar with. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. To be honest with you, these are terms that I didn't really give much thought prior to my institution at the time, back in 2021, I believe, when they first came to the organization and they invited staff to have a conversation about what these terms mean. And so, and kind of investigating, like, oh, where did this all come from? What was the inspiration for us having that moment to discuss and highlight how these ideas uh, are practiced in our organization? Well, if you think about it, following the murder of George Floyd in 2020 and other acts of social and racial injustice, the country actually experienced a high surge in DEI initiatives, which for a lot of us signaled progress and served as a symbol of hope for traditionally marginalized groups of people, including myself. We saw organizations expand their efforts around this work by hiring DEI officers, forming task committees, and some, if fortunate enough, even developed their own department that was solely committed to that work. But then, looking at research, right? According to LinkedIn, the years 2020 and 2021 marked a 123% increase in DEI job listings. No surprise there. I think we all understand that correlation. However, since then, we have also seen a significant decline in this market. And to put it in perspective, companies went from a 169 increase in employment for a chief diversity and inclusion officer to a 4.5% decline from that number that it was pre-pandemic. And this is significant. It's important to see this decrease because it implies that many of the companies that invested in those initiatives have since pulled back. However, research also proves that most Americans actually do grasp the importance of racial diversity. So how about we go ahead and take a look at some of those examples that really support that claim. Based on research gathered by author and policy advocate Heather McGhee, who is also a Chicago local and Chicago native, if you ask most white people in the housing market, they'll say that they prefer to live in a racially integrated neighborhood, and that they recognize the benefits of a multicultural perspective. And in 2014, there was a social psychologist named Linda Trop, who actually reported in a hearing about the New York City school system that 94% of 515 case studies from the 1940s through the 2000s showed that greater contact actually led to lower prejudice. It reduced anxiety in relation to other groups and also improved their ability to empathize with others who are different from them. Makes sense, right? But the reality is that diversity has become a commonly accepted good despite its elusiveness. And so when questioned on their decision to buy a home or to select a school for their children, Heather actually got a lot of responses that were like, I was looking for a good school, or, I really take test scores into consideration. I want my student, I want my child to actually be in a school where test scores matter, or the neighborhood just seemed more appealing, which, if you're a minority like myself, you recognize that this is all too often just coded language for a preference of a racial homogeneity. But if this same group of people, and when I say same group of people, I mean white people, recognize that diversity and inclusion should be prioritized, why is it often only acknowledged with little follow through or accountability? The truth is, most arts organizations also recognize that there is a disconnect. And in an effort to counter white supremacist practices and create a healthy environment for all people that are connected to the organization, a lot of them have come up with initiatives, or they've come up with plans that they advertise on their website, or that they share to the public just to let them know that there are steps being taken. And so, what I want to share with you all now is something that my current organization is working on and has shared with the public as a tool of accountability. And this is called Goodman Theater's Idea Action Plan. Um, and the action plan, as you can see here, obviously IDEA is an acronym. So that acronym stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Anti-Racism, and Access. Now, you've been hearing me speak for a while, so I'm actually going to switch it over to Ariel, who I'm going to invite to actually read our idea statement for this action plan.
All right, thanks, Tyra. We at Goodman Theater are storytellers who believe that a diversity of people, ideas, and cultures in our organization enriches both the art on stage and our civic engagement. In our workplace, we strive to reflect the communities we serve and make space in which everyone is empowered to bring their full, authentic self to work. Goodman Theater values equity, diversity, and inclusion and is committed to approaching our work with these values in mind. We acknowledge that underrepresented identities have not always been welcomed by the theater industry, but recognize that our individual intersectional identities bring vibrancy to our work and must be championed. The inclusion of identities such as ability, age, background, beliefs, ethnicity, gender expression, race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and all other identities represented across staff, board, artists, and audiences help make us better equipped to live these values on stage and off. I love how those are in alphabetical order. It just makes me happy. We chart our future course through the following living document: our action plan for inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism, and access, or IDEA. While we welcome all to this transformational process, we center our focus on people of color, POC, people with disabilities, women, and all underrepresented voices. The IDEA Action Plan, originally developed in 2020, was the result of a 6-month collaborative effort involving individuals at every level of our organization, artists, staff, leadership, and boards. The collective ideas, resources, diligence, and dedication to the Goodman community coalesce as the foundation of our IDEA Action Plan.
Thank you, Ariel. So as it's said in the statement, this is a living document, which means that it's actually reevaluated. And I believe that's done on a quarterly basis. So it's a tool that we recognize as something that will change over time as new initiatives are developed and as we see an increased need for this work. And the structure of this is built in as 5 cornerstones of accountability. So we have our diversity goals, our policy goals, engagement and outreach goals, programming goals, and then research and assessment. Ariel, would you please read the diversity statement?
We are committed to infusing diversity into every aspect of our operations. We recognize that our individual intersectional identities represented across staff, boards, artists, and audiences bring vibrancy to our work and help make us better equipped to reflect our world both on and off stage.
Thank you. So, striving to include an array of individual identities that are represented throughout the organization. So, our staff, board, artists, and our audiences. And as we're going through these descriptions, I also want to offer some of the examples of the work that we've already done and possibly some that we strive to accomplish in the next year or so as well. So, in this category, a good example would be to name the creation of our affinity groups. and also increasing minority representation in our creative teams. Also to say, increasing access for our Spanish patrons. For example, in my department for education, we are working on Spanish translated materials and also working on having a subtitle performance for our students, recognizing that that is a large demographic of the students that we serve. And we are also increasing opportunities to engage with Indigenous communities. I'll go ahead and read policy. We will work to revise and establish institutional policies to ensure a safe and respectful environment, break the traditional barriers of participation, and engage equitable practices for all who engage with our organization. So again, this is an effort to dismantle the former system of things, recognizing that that hasn't always benefited traditionally marginalized groups. And so something Goodman has done in the past couple of years is actually hiring a chief human resource officer who is actually the one who spearheads all of these idea plan initiatives and also make sure that we have someone who's really catering to the employee experience. Another example, increasing pay transparency and being more equitable and transparent within the organization about what those structures are, as well as advertising that in any hiring promotions that we offer on our websites or anywhere else that you may see. And then engagement and outreach goals. Ariel, could I have you read this description?
Gotcha. Using the tools of the theatrical profession, we aim to develop generations of citizens who understand the cultures and stories of diverse voices. We believe that a diversity of people, ideas, and cultures in our organization enriches both the art on stage and our civic engagement.
Thank you. I love this description, developing generations of citizens who understand the cultures and the stories. And I feel obviously being in education, right, that this is something that's really special. And so one of the examples that I wanted to share is the work that we produce through the Chicago Parks District every year. It's something that we started, I believe, 2 years ago. So now we're on our third year, but it's really increasing access to people who either don't know about the Goodman or have never even been to a theater production. And of course, expanding our reach to traditionally underrepresented communities. Also to say a goal of ours in the upcoming season is to develop a tech observation program that exposes teens and early career professionals to careers in production and to learn what goes on behind the scenes. Again, hopefully diversifying the field by reaching historically underrepresented communities in Chicago. Programming goals, I'll read this one. We will review our artistic priorities as demonstrated in the plays we produce, the artists we champion, the works we develop, and ensure that we uplift voices from people of color, people with disabilities, women, and underrepresented communities in creative endeavors going forward, both in new opportunities as well as in our ongoing and established efforts. So one example that I'll give here, going back to the work that we're doing in the Parks District, Goodman is developing what we like to call the Theater for the Very Young, which is a program that is creating or producing work with the 0 to 5 age demographic in mind, although it is also family friendly. So one of our goals is to commission a new adaptation of a Native American story for the Theater of the Very Young program. And then finally, research and assessment. Ariel, could I have you read this one?
Yep. We will invest in creating a more equitable American theater by meaning our internal systems and collaborating with industry professionals and other theaters who will help us analyze, measure, and track our goals with our action plan.
Yes. So using departmental tools and resources, again, to hold the organization accountable, and also to track the progress of all of these initiatives that are listed under these pillars. So some examples, creating a program audit. This is something that I have been working on with my director to really assess the structure of our school-based programs and just to see if the way that these are currently being ran is what our communities need at this time. Is it something that needs to be revamped? Is it something that needs to be tweaked? Or is it something that maybe needs to be discontinued and then we come up with something new based on the needs of our constituents? And with that, also hosting listening tours, which is a way of us to really hear from the people that we are engaging with through these programs and to see what are the things that they need, what are the things that they are benefiting from, and where is there room for improvement. And then finally, assessing talent development programs. So at our theater company, we actually have an array of different development programs. We have our internships, our apprenticeships, our fellowships, and just making sure that, again, the people who are being part of those programs are being able to take away the skills and the experience that they need to actually come in the industry and to really grow in their profession of choice. So if you're curious to read the full scope of our idea action plan, you can actually access that on our website. For the folks who are attending the training in the virtual setting, we'll make sure that you have that tool. For the folks who are attending via YouTube, um, I strongly encourage you to visit our website. If you go to goodmantheater.org and you click on our About tab, you should be able to find the full document of our idea action plan. So shifting gears a bit, I would now like to introduce our Empowering Perspective series, which, as I said at the beginning of this recording, this is the segment where participants will have an opportunity to hear from several of the Black Arts Ed leaders who share their perspective on common workplace challenges, as well as some solutions for combating some of those issues. And some of those folks actually were present for this workshop, which amazing. And some of those folks were unable to attend. So these perspectives will be shared in the form of 3 video clips. And each one is highlighting a different area of today's subject matter. And as you'll see shortly, these interviews consist of multiple takes from various degrees of leadership and artistic disciplines. So as you watch, I encourage you to take notes. I encourage you to really listen and lean in and to hopefully be able to continue the discussion even after watching these videos. I hope you enjoy.
Most times when I'm working in predominantly white institutions, it is we're going to teach the young people how to take these 3 things and make a play, or teach the young people how to do these 3 things and make a sculpture. And then every institution, all black institution or predominantly black institution has been like, we are going to take these children and tell them about these three things and teach them how to take these three things, incorporate it with themselves, and make a play. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm being clear about the difference to me, but it is that you're not just teaching the thing, you're talking about how that young person fits into the thing so they know how to use it.
A lot of times when I'm navigating a white space, the microaggressions that are happening to me are so like, let's go, let's move on, that I'm not paying quite as much attention. But there have been several times where I'm co-teaching and a Black student is not treated with respect. If a Black student is misbehaving, or especially if a Black student is very smart and misbehaving, like, white teaching artists have no idea how to deal with that. Like, have no idea. And it seems like they become aggressive, for lack of a better word, in trying to snip that out. And that has been the times that have probably infuriated me the most, where it feels like if I skip a day of class, then that Black kid is sitting somewhere in a corner not allowed to participate because nobody knew how to talk to that kid.
And anytime I bumped into issues with my white supervisors in teaching environments, it's been because they didn't understand that I was taking the time to teach the students about them and themselves and how to use the thing to tell their personal stories and incorporate it into themselves. They didn't understand why that step was necessary.
White women between the ages of 35 and 40, or between the ages of 35 and 50, they have no idea what it means to be a Black seventh grader. They have no idea. They have no idea, and I question if they've asked.
Ooh, I'll say three things. One, a fact. Black male educators make up only 2% of all educators in the US.
I think if I were to talk to 5 or 6 friends, even family members, I don't think many of them can recall ever having a Black male teacher. I would say predominantly white women. And that was definitely my experience.
I know 2 Black administrators, and that's you and Quinna.
Arts education in Chicago is full of middle-aged white women. It's full of middle-aged white women. Full of middle-aged white women.
I went to a thing the other night. There's 2 Black people in the room. A gala. 2 Black people. Me and the chair of the board of the organization. That was it.
As a Black woman who transformed an entire school district in 6 years, a Black woman with her master's degree, a Black woman with over 20 years experience, it took until Changing Worlds for me to get an executive director position.
You know, I think that I was in some ways sort of trotted out as like the token Black hire. I was, there are often times that I am the only like Black person on staff. And, that can be a tough space to be in. My supervisor calls it, the Black tax, when you're paying that Black tax, because you're having to like do your job, and then you're also navigating microaggressions, macroaggressions sometimes, but I think there's just sort of, sometimes it can be really insidious where, and I always wonder, you start to question yourself, like, what is this about? Like, is this about my race? Is this about like me as a human being? Is it about my temperament? But the idea that like, oh well, I'm not, my opinion is somehow less than.
Going into spaces where you don't see a lot of people who look like you. Like, to this day, I've only had one Black male teacher that I can recall for any part of my education. And that was my 6th grade teacher, Mr. Turner. Like, that's the only Black male teacher that I've had. I've had Black women as teachers, but so going into spaces where you don't see iterations of yourself reflected back to you was definitely, can definitely be jarring. I think the reason for that in particular is thing number two. A lot of places are built with this idea of all are welcomed here, as opposed to we have built this with you in mind. And so I found that many a times I was called into a space because those who were in service, and I think of teaching as like an act of service, those who are in service or trying to find a way to connect with the students and the populations that they were working with. And so a lot of times I got called in just like, we're working with this demographic, and we just think that you would be a good person to, and it's like, this is not how they would word it, but like how it would be received. It's like, oh, you want me in here because you think the Black and brown kids will relate to me because I'm Black.
So on the one end, there is this expectation of cultural expertise as though there is a single story for a Black person in our country. But the other side of that is that when you're speaking about things that are not culturally related or relevant, then you don't know nothing. It's like you give you're going, whoa, because you feel me, right? It's like, hi, I'm not speaking as the only person who has any input, but I will tell you from my experience that this is what needs to happen. But if it's about a boy in the hood, then maybe we listen. But if it's about an academic practice, if it's about an artistic practice, if it's about multi-tiered systems of support, I used to be an MTSS coordinator for a district. If it's about a program that I really feel this program would net more results than this program, and here is the evidence that supports that, it's like, oh, that is very interesting. Thank you for sharing, which typically means, yeah, we'll see, right? And then you're no longer the expert. So there is this tendency to decide external of me what I get to be an expert at and what I get to have voice into.
The third and final thing I will say is I was seldomly asked to be in leadership positions until until I became undeniable, like that which I provided became undeniable.
Of course, they're writing this curriculum, right? That probably steeped in their own experiences of like they know that they're under-resourced schools and individuals. They know that there are schools on the South Side that lack arts programming. They know this, but they also have their own childhood and school experiences, right? And I think one, they're moving with that, and that's an instant disconnect of just like you don't relate to the person you're serving at all. And then also, to be frank, money. I think it's money, right? I think as we're building programming, we know we can get a grant for this. We know that if we bring this very specific programming to this place, we'll get the grant, right? But are they asking, right? In what ways are they connecting with these schools, these institutions? Are they asking the young people who are present there what they're interested in seeing, what they're interested in doing, what their own like passions are? Or are they just like bringing the thing into a school because they have to?
Discussion for this video was not recorded. The discussion questions have been provided for viewers to reflect on their own. What were some of the challenges identified in this video? Were there any moments you were able to identify with the interviewees? Were there any moments when you struggled to connect? Feel free to pause here to reflect on your own. Video 2.
One of them, honestly, on the base level was hiring. Who's on the team? I would have had a much different experience at my previous job if I was the only teacher of color and the rest of even my boss were white. It'd be a way different experience.
They say that they're doing things. There's always an anti-racism message. We've always got a land acknowledgement. Chicago's great at that. But past that, my homie, I'm gonna go with nothing. I think there is a level of, gosh, this is like such a negative word, and it's because I can't think of another word. It's not because this is my deep feeling, but there's a level of fetishization or prioritization, like both of those things kind of mix, of Black teaching artists. Like, I know I can get a job, but if I'm gonna be safe in that job, that's never a guarantee at all.
A lot of institutions, a lot of places, not just teaching artist places, but places where art was being cultivated, adapted like land acknowledgements, and that is something that the folks still do. And it felt very much that too often acknowledgement was where the acknowledgement and action were being conflated. To acknowledge that there's a problem, but to do something about it are two separate things.
I don't care about nobody's equity statement. I don't care about nobody's equity policy. I tell people all the time who have asked me, like, how did you do what you did? I want to have this at my district. We need to hire an equity person. Get out of my face with that. If equity is not the umbrella, then it can't be a part. Equity is not about to transform. You're not about to put that all on one equity office. Make it the umbrella of what you do. If you are not willing to fully commit to transforming what you do to be more inclusive, it will not work. And it is going to cause unnecessary labor and unnecessary harm and false hope.
I think that the DEI practice is valuable, and I think the conversations also have to happen in order for people to be able to practice. Because I promise you, I can tell you 40 final exams I took where I never talked about the thing again, and you might ask me something about it. I may know a little something. I probably know nothing, and probably wouldn't implement it if I had the opportunity, just because I don't remember.
My current work, I think the efforts that have been made were made departmentally and not institutionally. So I think step in as a department. I think we are pretty locked in on making sure everyone is like cared for and like giving space for different perspectives and recognizing we're all, different races, different ages, different gender identities and all that stuff. And I think we departmentally have a really good tap on that. But I think institutionally, I don't know what efforts have been made. There is like the ethos DEI committee thing. And I can say, yes, that is an effort, but I don't know how many people are actually, right? It's like you came up with the DEI committee, but I'm not actually sure. I have no updates on that committee or what they do.
Before I arrived, in the 2020 of it all, there was a plan put in place to sort of each department kind of look at how that work is showing up in their department, and to sort of like check in with it quarterly, I believe, and then it continued to be quarterly upon my arrival. And now we're sort of sharing out in more intentional ways with senior staff, and that's so it's not just becoming like an Excel document, because that's the thing. It just kind of became an Excel where everything just sort of lived and we can kind of check off boxes, and then needed to evolve to be like, okay, how can each department harness this work? I think that's something that we've talked about in our engagement department is, it's not one department's job to manage all of that. It's not one person's job or even a committee's job, because we have a committee, but it really is up to each individual department to really see that work as part of the work that they do.
I don't think as a dancer, I don't see a lot of and here's the deal. And I was having this conversation with someone else recently. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, what we think of as diversity, equity, and inclusion is not what the globe is thinking of. Because for me, I'm specifically talking about Black people, and it's beyond that now. So when you see a company like the Joffrey Ballet, who will probably say we are one of the most diverse dance companies in the country, in their mind, they think that they are because they've got kids. They have dancers from all over the world, but they do not have any Black Americans in the company or standout Black dancers. They have Dara. She's one woman. But I think that depending on the success of that particular organization, and even in the academy, no Black kids, none, zero.
Diversity, equity, inclusion, that work is the bright red line that says, listen, be a racist ass if you want to, be ridiculous if you want to, oppress people or hold people back from opportunity if you want to, but if you do, there'll be consequences. We won't fund you. We won't allow you in our schools. We won't this, we won't that. So I think that's the importance. Not that it does anything in mind changing. And I think that's a very and I think this whole we have to change minds and hearts. I think that whole idea is kind of Pollyanna and kind of childish. I don't care about changing minds and hearts. I care about changing the system. Like, if the system changes, why do we care how people feel about it? Right? So I think that's the work of diversity and equity and inclusion and all the alphabet and all the letters and alphabets around it. I think the work is to make sure that everybody knows this is the way we have to behave, whether you like it or not.
In practice, what does DEIA look like to you? How does your organization incorporate policies that promote a healthy, safe, and respectful environment?
Nadine says, my organization has a long way to go in this area. It would appear that anytime a person of color, Black, is in charge, someone always appoints or sends someone who's often white, to oversee the work that is being done. It's degrading and disrespectful. They have a long way to go. Nadine, if you don't mind me asking, is this something you've noticed at multiple schools or just one school in particular?
Hey, it's been at multiple schools. I've been in the district for a very long time, since 2011, so I guess you can consider that a long time. But it just seems to be a trend that things have to be done a particular way that fits a status quo, as opposed to what might be culturally appropriate and fitting for a campus. I can even speak to it being a part of what seems to be a pattern. The higher you go up, if there are individuals of color overseeing projects or events, et cetera, there's always someone coming in to undermine and or completely say, hey, we don't like the way that's being done, when it might be out of a sense of creativity, out of a sense of speaking with parties that are involved to make sure that the collective is comfortable and ready to go with performances, what presentations, what have you. I don't think that we have reached a place that we are completely free to show our artistic abilities to date, and that's just where I'm at. That's my truth as I know it right now today.
Yeah. So I think it definitely traces back to that intersectionality that Anya was speaking to earlier, right? the the unfortunate white supremacy practices that have been rooted in in our country for the past what 4 centuries now, you know. So to see this behavior reflected in CPS schools, at least to me, doesn't really come as a surprise. I'm just disappointed that that's something that you experience, even having as much experience as you do within education. We have one more comment in the chat that I want to highlight, and then we'll move on to our last video. Demi says, my current organization has done a good job of incorporating informed positive change and policies, and I look forward to improving upon the work. Thank you, Demi. I feel similarly. And again, Demi is someone who also works for the Goodman. Demi's actually been with the organization for a while now. But for me, again, only being 3 months in this position, I'm still learning all of the initiatives that are being taken towards these efforts. And the more I learn, the more that I enjoy. But again, that accountability, that follow through, and more so, how are we being in conversation with the people we are serving? Because for all of us really who work in arts education, we are often the face of the institution. We are the ones who are out in the community. We are the ones who are in the schools. And so sometimes it makes you wonder, what is the organization doing to also protect us when we are out in the field? How does that work trickle down outside of beyond the walls of our respective institutions? And now we're going to move on to our last video. It is also our shortest video. And I'll be sure to put that essential question in the chat as well.
Number one is hiring practices. Who you choose to bring in the room, and that has to do with race, gender, age, and experience. So I'm very grateful to past employers and current ones for really sticking true to either the school's mission or their personal mission of making sure that the department or the staff looks the way that the community looks, especially in the arts. Arts is not just any one kind of person. So why not have the people teaching it reflect that?
Make their black leaders lead the charge. That makes sense. You know, if you brought me in and I'm a VP and I'm the only person here, then it is probably up to me to say, or somebody to come to me and say, hey, you know what, I think that we could probably pull in a stronger pool of people, and why aren't we? Why aren't more Blacks interested in going here to study? Why aren't more Blacks interested? Because there's something about whatever it is that this organization is doing or representing that's making people feel that this is not a place that I can be or a place that I'm welcome.
What I used at District 65 was we applied a racial equity impact assessment tool to every single policy that we did. Every single policy, every single budget, every single decision had to go through that racial equity impact assessment tool. And one of the core tenets of that tool is to include stakeholder voice in decision making. And one of the things that I was committed to when I was in a board leadership position was that stakeholder inclusion had to involve informed consent, You can't just ask people their opinion, you need to provide information. What is your opinion related to? What is the best possible outcome? What are the worst possible outcomes? Now tell us what you want.
Well, first of all, listen. Just listen. Just listen to them.
We need to be trained, and we need to be trained well. And I would argue that we need to be trained more diligently than the white teaching artists. And I know that sounds wild, but like the biggest thing that I want to be able to do is I want to be able to go to a school that's under resourced, and I want to be able to give the kids something. But if I'm not trained to do that, I can't do that. And that's how I feel right now as a teaching artist, that I'm stuck in spaces that have resources to train me, and I cannot give to like my communities or people that look like me to the same extent.
I think because I think there's a balance, right? I don't want you to come to me to fix all of your problems, but I want you to listen to me if I'm telling you an option to fix a problem.
I think obviously like having a system in place for like I mentioned before, like the EDIA plans, systems, making sure that those are already like that those set an equitable groundwork or foundation. And then beyond that, I do wonder about hiring practices, of course, and having those folks installed in the organization that, so that it's not just like, oh, we just got one, we got our one, we have our one token, engagement person or whatever it is. But also I think encouraging space for community and collaboration, I think really kind of across the board. I mean, I think like recognizing that everyone at the organization is more than just their labor, and hopefully our jobs can be a place where we can find community. So I think sort of loosening the grip of those white supremacists and patriarchal like need for productivity.
Pay equity. Making sure that people are being paid their worth, all the people that work there. Because I have been in environments where the Black teaching artists and the brown teaching artists weren't making the same money. It's a real thing that happens. So pay equity, one. And if I say it's wrong, if I say it's uncomfortable, if I say it's racist, if I say it, you need to believe me. If you're a Black artist in a predominantly white institution, and you go and you say, I went to this school and this principal was saying things and it felt like what's that? It felt like a microaggression. Your job as administration is to be like, let me check into that.
What really makes the change is a heart change and a mind change. And I think heart and mind changes have to come through conversation, right? Because I could look at you and say, oh, she looks like she insert all of these things here, right? Just based on perception. But once you and I have a conversation, and then we have another conversation, and then we have another conversation, every subsequent interaction changes potentially how I feel about you, right? And gives me more information about the accuracy of my processing.
They are failing to recognize that the culture, those in leadership, they're the ones who determine what the culture is. And if something is changing, that means that they must also, because they have the most influence as decision makers in that space. But you got to actually be able to relinquish and that trust that the people that you brought into the space can actually do the job that you hired them for and are not just there for optics.
Okay. Was our last video. And now for our moment of discussion. First question, what were some suggestions provided by the interviewees that resonated with you? And you know what? Because it's twofold, I'll also include the second question. Were there any recommendations you would be interested in prioritizing at your own organization or incorporating into your personal practice? We got a raised hand from Ashley. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks for reminding me. I was attached to the idea of relinquishing control. I think that's something like everybody can practice. And I think that that's something that's like being specifically called upon organizations and predominantly white organizations to do that they're having a lot of trouble with. And I think like that's one of the biggest things is it's like there's a certain amount of control that has been had that has to be released in order for change. And I know for myself personally, that's difficult to do on a personal level, and I can't imagine how difficult it is to do it at an institutional level. But I think it needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we're being transparent, it's hard to retrain your brain if you are used to this one way of doing things. And unless you are being held accountable, unless there is another entity that is telling you this is what you need to do, then how are we supposed to ensure that that happens? Jalen, you have a raised hand. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to speak on, I believe it was Ashley in that interview who spoke about Black teaching artists needing to be trained more diligently. And I thought that was really an interesting thing to come up because it came up when we spoke in our interview session about of like just what were some of the setbacks or some of the moments that I've had that really like messed me up. And I think that the thought of like that we need to be trained more diligently like speaks to the fact, and like the reason it came up when we spoke, it's like when we're talking about Black and brown teaching artists in relation to our white counterparts, right? Like I learned to be a teaching artist on the fly. I learned on the job. It was horrible. It was hard. I messed up in a lot of ways. And we're very often when we're in those positions, right, of like learning on the fly, usually if we're paired with a co-teacher and that co-teacher is white, right, they may have had the privilege of being able to take some sort of unpaid internship straight out of college that allowed them to do whatever, right? Like there's an access barrier there. And so I think when we're talking about training, like I thought that was so smart because again, like the same access that we have to just general education, right? That training also applies to our teaching artistry careers. If we, you know, if it's hard for us to get into these academic institutions for theater degrees or whatever, then in what ways are we supposed to learn how to do the thing, right? It's a trickle down effect, right? And so I think as, you know, spaces like Ingenuity and ArtsEd and all these folks continue to do these sort of workshops, really considering, right, what is equitable and accessible training for people who may not have had the opportunity to have it. Like, I think that is such an interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Can I jump in here, Tyra?
So who's speaking?
This is Anya.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead. And then we'll hear from Jared.
To that end, I just wanted to mention recently when Changing Worlds, when we did our strategic plan, we included a gesture at coming up with a teaching artist mentor program. And part of that came out of, I know for me, came out of the fact that I participated in our teaching artist cadre interviews over the summer, and we interviewed some really stellar candidates that had the passion and had a deep knowledge of their art, but had very little youth development experience. And I felt like that was a tragedy, but that we weren't able to hire them. But we also did not have the funding to allow them to co-teach and receive the same pay as a standard teaching artist on our cadre. Now, many of our teaching artists are Black. Probably 40 to 50% of our active teaching artist cadre is Black, and they are stellar, highly qualified, very prepared teaching artists in their field of study, in their field of practice, as well as youth development. However, what that experience of interviewing folks who were ready to be ready, but we didn't have the resources to necessarily get them over the line, revealed to me is that there is a great deal more passion and potential in our community, and we need to invest the proper time and resources into cultivating those opportunities for folks. And so I just say that to say that as a leader, that has certainly been evident to me and something that we are prioritizing. And also that, we need to invest the time, energy, and resources into making those opportunities possible. And it is possible.
Thank you, Anya. Jared, I recall you having a raised hand as well. You want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, just in uplifting some of the points shared by Anya and by Jalen, in speaking about training models, I think uplifting the notion that it's a continuous process. I think something that's challenging about this work is that it can often be done or feel like it is being done on an island, in a way that's isolated and in a way that like is very labor intensive and emotionally laborious, like for the individual to do the work. And so I think too, thinking about sort of in those training models, in those staffing models, just thinking about sort of what it means to create senses of community and create senses of cohort. I think, in speaking with other arts educators and speaking with teaching artists, like those moments of highlight come from being able to learn in conversation with other folks. And so just uplifting that notion of the training as well, that idea of it not being an individual pursuit or an individualistic pursuit, and instead one that should and must be based in community, whether that's, part of a cohort of teaching artists who work together and develop things together, whether it's, organizations like Ingenuity or other ArtsEd Shy folks that like bring folks together across organization, but just the recognition and celebration of like a cohort approach to this development and sort of ongoing continuous learning that must be a part of the work as well.
Dana, let's hear from you, and then we'll close out with Ashley.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add in I love this conversation about training and having it feel both like communal as you're sharing, Jared, and then also really individualized too, and like informed. Someone used the phrase informed consent, and I just thought that was really helpful as we think about training too, that it's like that the teaching artist would have agency over the training that they feel that they need to, in terms of, right, like if like Jalen was saying, like there's someone who's asking for training or wanting more training, that they can find that, but that we're not saying, well, I assume you need more training because of XYZ, right? And then I think also just creating more on-ramps. Like I know Tyra, you and I and Kristen on this call too have been working on creating on-ramps and pathways to teaching artistry, because like Jalen said too, it's often a field in which people are just thrown into it immediately into a classroom. And so ways that we can have support systems for emerging teaching artists that that allow for training in these types of things, as well as content and stuff like that. Yeah.
And then Ashley, if you also wanted to share your thoughts.
Yes, but I also was like open to surrendering to, I don't want to say your name wrong, Nadine, because I had said something and they had their hand raised.
Yeah, I think Nadine had their hand raised first, actually.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for that, Ashley.
Hey, I'm here. Oh, okay. Yes. You know, there's a measure, one word that I think that would make this all gel together from everything that I've been hearing. And that is a level of vulnerability, to be able to have that freedom to say, you know what, I don't know, or I don't know yet. And to be able to have a safe space to be able to say that, so that you're able to evolve. But I think there's something that's making me really excited right now, is to see everyone uh, uh, ma- making these comments and doing things, and just I just want to be a source of encouragement to you all, because I for the past couple of weeks, over the past year, I have made a special point to point out to people that the last time that we came out of a pandemic, we had the Harlem Renaissance as a result of that, and there was an explosion of creativity. And I one of the things that I like about being an educator right now, even at the high school level, elementary level, whatever it might be, is that these kids really do have something to say, and to be able to be the ones to be the leaders, to step into that role and to guide them. So in whatever um, atmosphere or position that you find yourself, embrace that, embrace it, and jump in with it and enjoy the journey. We will get there, hopefully, in all the levels of equity that we're talking about. But vulnerability, to be able to say, I don't know yet, and the operative word being yet.
Thank you for that, Nadine. I am also included amongst that group. Ashley, did you also have something you wanted to share?
Yes, that was so beautiful. Yeah, I was just saying, as an emerging teaching artist, I think one of the biggest things I've noticed coming into this is kind of like, um as artists, and I'm sure, I don't know if this is true of teachers or just teachers who are teaching art, but like, it just feels like we're always operating from this place of lack. There's no money, there's no resources, there's no this, there's no that. And I had an acting teacher tell me, like, in order for you to get there, you have to say that you deserve to be there. You know what I mean? And I like started to try to operate on this idea of like, okay, I arts education is needed. It's like so needed. And whether people are investing in it or not, it doesn't negate its need. And I really like am like trying to focus on this idea of operating from a place of a glass full, like that we should be able to seek opportunities to be trained with people that look like us. We should be able to be in spaces where we're teaching students who look like us, or at least teaching students how to treat people who look like us. And so that was just something I wanted to say.
Thanks, Ashley. Ariel says a place of abundance instead of one of scarcity. Yes. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to our next slide. Have those hard conversations. Yes, yes. And again, as I said at the beginning of this session, sometimes those conversations can be very uncomfortable, but if we don't bring them to the people in power, if we don't bring it to their attention, how is that change supposed to happen? Let's skip ahead. We're running a little behind on time. Let's skip ahead. There we go. All right. So there's been a lot of information shared today. All great things, all informative. Thank you again, everyone, for approaching this work from a place of genuine curiosity, and to highlight a word that Nadine used, being vulnerable and transparent in what you have shared. To close out, I would like for folks to consider some of what's been shared today, some of the ideas or the wants or the desires that have been shared via chat, but also verbally in the space, and to use, let's say the next 3 to 5 minutes to create a list of at least three things that you can either bring back to your organization or adopt to your own personal practice that centers Black voices in arts education. And during this time, we'll go ahead and play some music because I like to listen to music while I work. So I'll go ahead and put myself off camera and muted, and then I'll pop back in shortly to check in.
And just so that you all know, we'll have an opportunity to share some of these in the chat if you want to, but they really are primarily for you to use. So feel free to really get in there.
All right. We have a couple of people who have shared in the chat. So again, just highlighting those voices. First, we have Nadine. I am really interested in creating a new organization that focuses on raising the means to assist Black artists and predominantly Black schools to secure the resources they need to further the arts. I love that. I love that. Would love to be in conversation with you about that. Demi says, listen to Black voices at all levels within the organization, continue to support affinity groups, promote and encourage professional development, embrace collaborative work towards building equitable policies. Yes, yes. Nadine says, have courageous conversations in order to speak truth to power, to create more creative outlets for students. Oh, I love it. Oh, absolutely love it. Thank you, you all, again for this time. I know all of us have so many different priorities to focus on at our respective institutions, but the work that has been done today, the conversations that have been started today, I'm hopeful, and I hope you feel the same way. Dana says, number one, make the idea plan more than just statements and words. Make it embodied, human-centric, actionable, and non-negotiable. Number two, loving the idea that Anya brought forward of a racial equity impact assessment tool, me as well, that every decision passes through. And then number three, creating differentiated and self-selected training models to get folks what they are asking for instead of what we're telling them they need. Ooh, a word. And then finally, leaning into the idea of releasing control that Greg brought forward and Ashley expanded.
Okay. So it looks like something may have happened to Tyra's internet or her computer because she's not on the call anymore. But thankfully, it didn't happen until the very end. So we had very few little gremlins today. So again, thank you all very much to all of you for being here. And thank you to Tyra for all of her tireless work in putting this together. She said that she spent over 90 hours with the interviews and editing the videos. So I don't know where she created that time, but this has been absolutely wonderful, and I'm really excited and happy that all of you were here and that you were really responsive and engaged. So I know Tyra was planning on letting you know that if you wanted to continue the conversation, you can contact her through the Goodman Theater, Tyra Bullock at goodmantheater.org. Again, she's the Associate Director of Education, and I know she's very excited about continuing these conversations, as am I, and it sounds like the rest of you here as well. And just a couple of little things for Ingenuity, which is how we generally end our little sessions. We have a lot of different ways that we are requesting your feedback. And as you may or may not know, Ingenuity is primarily a data-centered organization, and it is almost entirely my job to get data from the Arts Partner Network sector, in addition to the work that our data team does with their data collection through the Creative School Survey and the work that they do with the schools. And so I have here just a few things that we're asking for your feedback from. The first one is feedback about this particular session. So all of our residents work super hard on what they're doing. And as I mentioned, Tyra has probably worked the hardest, not surprisingly. So it's really important that you take just a few minutes to fill out the exit survey for this session. And you can find that, I think Fuma is dropping the all the links in the chat right now, but that one is tinyurl.com/Tyra feedback. And that one is particularly for this session. The next one, if you were at the State of the Arts Education convening just a couple of weeks ago, we are still looking for feedback on how you all felt about that session. We've had a lot of anecdotal feedback and mentions from you all, but it's really important for our funders and for advocating for more events like this or bigger events like this, that we have the data to show how people were feeling about the event itself, but also our responsiveness to your previous feedback. So you can find that one at tinyurl.com/SOTACon24. That's SOTA, in case you're just listening, which stands for State of the Arts. And then we also have a survey that the original idea was to disseminate this survey before this session, but as you have heard now for a third time, Tyra spent a lot of hours working on the interviews. And so, but we're still interested in finding more feedback from Black arts education leaders. So we have a survey that we've disseminated, also very short. All of these are very short surveys. So if you identify as Black and you are working in arts education, we ask that you take this survey and tell us a little bit about your experience as an arts education leader. And if you know other Black arts leaders in the sector, to please go ahead and disseminate this survey to them as well. And that's tinyurl.com/ing, ING, Black Voice, BLKVOICE. And then finally, you all are the first to hear about this, except maybe Dana, who was on a call yesterday. But we are launching our annual Partnerships in Learning survey. And this year we've redesigned it, first of all, to be much, much shorter. So those of you who have taken it before are like, oh, great, here's the 20-minute long survey. It is not that long anymore. But also to focus very much on quality and learning, particularly what the learning needs are for the sector this year. So you all are the first to hear about our survey launching, and there may be some tiny tweaks between now and maybe the end of this week, but you are here and you heard it first. So if you can participate in our Partnerships in Learning annual survey, that one is tinyurl.com/INGPL2024. So these are all of the different ways that we're asking for your feedback. I know that's a lot of surveys, and we also really do take into account the things that you tell us when we're on calls with you, or when we see you out in the field. So those things are just as important, but it's really helpful for us to be able to organize the data and report on it when we hear from you in these surveys. So thank you all very much. And I think Tyra's back, so I'll let her also say a quick thank you before we head out.
Yes. Thank you again for attending. If you enjoyed what you experienced today, in the last slide, I had my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. If you would like to learn more about Goodman's IDEA action plan, you can also access that on our website. The conversation does not end here. Please feel free to reach out. Let's keep it going. And be sure to share some of what you learned with your respective institutions as well.
Thanks again so much, Tyra. And thank you to all of you.
Thank you, y'all. This was great.